You ever think you know your family and then realize you don't know anything at all? Well, that was me. Riley Hart. 3 weeks before my wedding, I came home for something small, just a pair of earrings, and ended up overhearing the cruel plan my parents and sister had cooked up designed to humiliate me in front of everyone I cared about. And, well, let's just say, what they thought would destroy me was about to backfire in ways they couldn't even imagine. It was past midnight when I found myself back at my parents' house, clutching the pearl earrings Grandma Rose had pressed into my hand earlier. Something borrowed, she'd said, her fingers trembling just a little. The hallway was dark, quiet, except for that thin strip of light sneaking out from under my father's study door. I should have just grabbed the earrings and left. I know that now. But then I heard it my name, spoken with a venom that froze me right in place. Riley's always been too proud for her own good. My mother's voice, sharp, full of satisfaction, and it made my skin crawl. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering like a drum. The scent of late-night coffee mixed with my father's cologne drifted through the crack under the door. Shadows moved inside. 3 of them, my parents, and someone else. My stomach dropped. Timing had to be perfect. I realized when I heard my sister Sloane's voice, excited, meticulous. Right when Dad finishes his toast, when everyone's looking at her, she'll pull the thread. The outer layer of the dress will come away completely. She'll be standing there in her underwear, and the crowd, 200 guests, will laugh. Every single eye on me. I could barely breathe. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling a gasp, and my knees gave way on the cold hardwood floor. I had to hear more. I had to know. And then I did. The slideshow. My father, usually warm and engaging, spoke with the kind of precision a surgeon might use, planning each cut, each exposure. Marion, the photos are ready. Every awkward teenage moment. My mother confirmed. That school picture with braces and acne. The summer camp moment she wet herself. The failed piano recital. I've titled it Riley's Journey to Womanhood. They laughed, all 3 of them, in unison. My fingers dug crescents into my palms. I could feel my own pulse pounding in my ears. They had charted this entire humiliation meticulously, down to the photos, the video, the exact timing. Then Sloane added her own flourish. She's gotten too big for her britches since Ethan proposed. She sneered, acting like she's better than us because she's marrying into the Walker family. I swallowed hard. My father followed up, his voice clinical, detached, just like he used to be when planning corporate takeovers. A coordinator at a mid-tier consulting firm, barely able to cover her share of the wedding, he said with a sneer, and my mother, as if counting coins, reminded them of every dollar spent, 43,000 so far, every penny, tracked and cataloged. Well, Riley, she said, you'll have a wedding no one will forget, and God, that line hit me like ice water. The coffee scent grew stronger as footsteps approached. I scrambled backward, knee hitting the console table, and caught a photo frame just in time. It wobbled in my hands, a snapshot of the 4 of us, smiling, at Sloane's college graduation. All smiles, all lies. The breakaway dress, Sloane explained, arrives Tuesday. She told the seamstress it was for a theater production. She reinforced the thread. She said, 1 firm tug during the father-daughter dance, and boom. My stomach churned at the thought. My beautiful dress, the one I'd cried over, the one I'd imagined walking down the aisle in, was to be weaponized against me. Questions flashed through my mind faster than my pulse. What about Ethan? Maybe he would try to cover me, my father mused. Or perhaps he'd be conveniently fetching drinks at the bar. My mother added, Veronica Hale is giving a toast right before yours. Victor, they planned, coordinating everything with military precision. Their planning was terrifying. They had mapped every angle, every possible interference, every human variable in a social experiment designed to break me. The clock chimed once, midnight. Should we feel bad about this? Sloane asked. Fishing for reassurance, they needed to put me in my place. My mother said, and my father shrugged. A prank. They called it just a prank. 200 witnesses, 200 people, my humiliation cataloged, my name and image spread across social media before the night was done. Just a prank. I rose slowly, legs shaking, leaving the pearl earrings behind. The spring air hit my flushed face as I stepped outside, vomiting into the hedge just a few houses down. My mind raced, spinning faster than my pulse. They wanted to pull a thread. Let them. But they had no idea what thread they were tugging at. No clue what would unravel in their world. I pulled out my phone and opened an encrypted email app. Fingers steady now, despite the rage boiling inside. 3 weeks until the wedding. 3 weeks to prepare. They wanted to make me the laughingstock. They would witness my counter, the show they'd never see coming. But I wouldn't be the one standing exposed when the curtain fell. I stood under the stars, breathing deep, my determination solidifying. The images of their plan, the dress, the slideshow, the calculated cruelty played in my mind like a horror reel. I remembered my grandmother's pearls, the quiet wisdom in her hands as she pressed them to me earlier. Something borrowed, something I would take, but not as they intended, something that would carry with it my own power, my own control. I replayed the conversation in my head. My parents had thought of everything, the timing, the positioning, the AV systems, the rehearsals. The thought made my stomach twist. They were confident, smug, practically congratulating themselves in my mind. My own sister had been recruited, her youthful excitement harnessed for their malicious plan. Every tiny detail had been plotted, and yet, there I was, outside their study, and suddenly I understood the only thing they hadn't accounted for me. I had secrets of my own. I had resources they never imagined. I had patience, and I had time. I remembered every slight, every dismissive comment, every moment they made me feel small, documented not in photos or videos, but in my memory, in the sharpness of my own mind. They believed they had control over me, that my life was mapped, that I was powerless, and right there, on that quiet, cold street, I realized that the power had shifted, not in their hands, but in mine. Every detail of their plan was etched in my mind. My father's corporate detachment, my mother's meticulous tracking, Sloane's gleeful anticipation. They had rehearsed it, perfected it, and believed they were untouchable. But the irony wasn't lost. The very traits that had allowed me to survive, to grow, to excel in silence, my patience, my strategic thinking, my calm under pressure would turn their scheme against them. The dress, the thread, the slideshow. It would all be their undoing, but not in the way they expected. They'd pulled the wrong thread. I thought about the images they had chosen for the slideshow, humiliating school photos, videos of private failures, snapshots of awkward teenage moments. The humiliation they'd imagined was meant to echo in every corner of the reception, every whispered conversation among friends and strangers alike. They wanted to reduce me to a spectacle. They wanted to control the narrative, to define me in a moment of orchestrated vulnerability. And yet, in my hands, the narrative could change entirely. My mind raced, tracing back to their comments about Ethan. My father had considered how he might interfere, or not. My mother had planned around his presence. Even the positioning of Veronica Hale for the toasts. Every variable had been noted. It was a perfect plan, perfect in its cruelty, and I would turn it into a perfect lesson for them. The elegance of it was in the details. They had overlooked my resourcefulness, my foresight, my capacity for calculated preparation. I sank to the curb for a moment, catching my breath. Each movement in that house, each word spoken behind the oak door, had been recorded in my memory. I could hear the precise timing, the dialogue, the laughter, the cruel satisfaction set ringing in their voices. And with it, I felt a strange calm settle over me. They had underestimated me. They always had. Every assumption they made about my dependence, my limitations, my lack of sophistication was a blind spot I would exploit. I thought about the dress, my beautiful gown, a symbol they intended to weaponize. The idea of transforming it from an instrument of humiliation into a tool of revelation and power sparked something fierce within me. They imagined me standing exposed, defeated. But I would stand, not in shame, but in full command. The dress would be my armor, my statement, my unspoken declaration of agency. What they had plotted as my downfall would instead illuminate the truth. And that, I realized, was worth every moment of fear, every shiver of panic, every step outside their door that night. 3 weeks, that was all the time I needed to plan, to assemble resources, to orchestrate a response that would not just neutralize their scheme, but turn it into a spectacle of truth and justice. I would call in favors, align allies, and transform their assumptions into weapons against them. The rehearsal of their cruelty would become a demonstration of their own folly, a display of how power, intelligence, and patience could outmaneuver arrogance and entitlement. And so I began to plan. Right there under the stars, the cool night air anchoring me in the present while my mind stretched forward, envisioning the possibilities. They wanted to humiliate Riley Hart. Well, Riley Hart had other plans. Every detail I had overheard would be anticipated, countered, and inverted. They thought they were the directors of this story. They had no idea who the protagonist had become and who she could call upon to execute a perfect, meticulously orchestrated reversal. The final thought, as I rose from the curb and brushed dirt from my skirt, was simple: let them pull their thread. Let them think the stage was theirs. But they had no idea the thread was attached to something much larger than my dress, something that would unravel far beyond their wildest expectations. In the quiet night, I felt the first spark of resolve ignite into a flame of determination. The clock was ticking, 3 weeks, and when the time came, the revelation would be mine. By morning, the cool light of dawn hit differently. To the world, I was Riley Hart, the struggling event coordinator, still in my parents' eyes, barely scraping by. But in reality, I was the CEO and majority shareholder of High End Strategy Group, a multi-billion-dollar empire I'd built in the shadows while everyone assumed I was living paycheck to paycheck. 5 years of calculated silence, careful navigation, strategic maneuvers, all invisible to the people who'd raised me. They had never seen the boardrooms where I had sat at the head of a table, shaping deals that shifted industries. They had no idea the woman they thought they could embarrass in a dress was controlling millions in assets and reshaping predictive analytics on a global scale. I sat in my corner office, 32 stories above the city, the morning sun glinting off the glass windows. The nameplate read Harrison, a convenient alias I'd maintained for years, a mask I wore so no one would connect my public persona to the one they assumed was struggling. Behind that door, I wasn't the daughter they remembered. I was powerful, resourceful, and more than a match for the plans they had in motion. My laptop reflected the city skyline as I reviewed the final details of the Morrison acquisition. $200 million in assets, 17 international patents, and a revolutionary AI platform. My signature alone would seal the deal tomorrow. Yet my mind wasn't on business. It was on the spectacle my family was about to try and stage. They thought they were orchestrating my downfall. Little did they know, I had been planning long before I ever heard a word of their scheme. The first call was to Isadora Vale, the fashion designer whose creations graced red carpets and Broadway stages. I remembered meeting her at a charity gala, representing high-end openly, blending my two worlds. "Riley, darling," her voice sparkled warmly. "Tell me you're finally letting me dress you for something fabulous." "My wedding," I said cautiously. "Actually, I need a favor, a complicated one." The dress needed modifications specifically for a potential wardrobe sabotage. I had to be careful, not giving away the full plan, but ensuring she understood the stakes. "Are you familiar with breakaway costume design?" A pause, then a laugh. "Honey, I've dressed Broadway for 20 years. What are we breaking away?" And why I explained the concept carefully, framing it as a transformation rather than humiliation, an evolution that would turn an attempted embarrassment into something spectacular. We arranged to meet immediately. Coffee, cronuts from Dominique, she insisted, and I promised I'd bring both. Her excitement was infectious, the kind that only comes from creating theater in silk and satin. The dress would be the first line of defense, the visible manifestation of a carefully constructed counterplan. It wasn't just couture, it was strategic theater, physics and aesthetics combined, a weapon and a shield. Isadora's creativity would be crucial. She understood that every fold, every hidden seam could be a plot point, a variable in a narrative of public revelation. Next was Darren Cole. In public, the city's hottest DJ. In private, a security expert specializing in corporate espionage and surveillance. He had worked with me before, thwarting attempts to breach Hyan's systems, and I knew his skills would translate perfectly to a personal mission. "You need surveillance," I told him, outlining the essentials: full coverage, every angle, audio enhancement on targeted conversations, with me personally controlling the AV system. "The Ravencrest estate," he acknowledged, familiar with the antiquated but workable layout. "What's the real play here?" he asked. "Insurance," I said simply, "and possibly evidence. Legal trouble. Not for me, my kind of leverage." He understood immediately. "Send me the guest list, a floor plan, and I want cameras you couldn't spot with a microscope. Every step, every reaction, every ill-timed gesture would be documented." This wasn't paranoia. It was precision. The third call was the hardest. Jenna Morell, a forensic accountant I trusted with my life. She answered immediately, sharp and practical. "Tell me you're not in legal trouble," she said, her voice cutting through the phone with ease. "Not exactly," I replied. "Different trouble." I needed her to uncover financial transfers from my parents, particularly those involving Sloan, and any large movements connected to Marcus Thorne, that sleazeball who tried to undermine Hyan last year. We spoke in terms of public records, social media, cross-referencing accounts, and tracing every penny that might indicate collusion or fraud. She whistled low, impressed by the depth of what I was asking, but not surprised. She understood the stakes. My family was about to publicly humiliate me, and I intended to make sure the truth was more compelling than any insult they could deliver. With my team assembled, I began the orchestration. Isadora would modify the dress to withstand sabotage while creating a breathtaking reveal. Darren would ensure full AV coverage, triggered at the exact moment Sloan and my parents attempted their cruelty. Jenna would monitor financials, creating a trail that would expose deceit, embezzlement, and fraud, transforming their carefully planned attack into evidence of their own corruption. Veronica Hale and Robert Chase would provide credibility and witness testimony, their presence guaranteeing that industry leaders would see me as I truly was, not the struggling daughter they assumed. I had assembled the perfect team, a combination of artistry, technical mastery, and legal precision. and each person understood the role they played in the larger strategy. I thought about the irony. My family had assumed that I was vulnerable, dependent, naive. They believed they could manipulate, embarrass, and control me. But all those assumptions had been built on their own ignorance. They had no knowledge of the years I had spent quietly building an empire, cultivating allies, creating contingencies. They had no idea the daughter they thought they knew was capable of orchestrating a response that would render their entire plan meaningless. The thrill of anticipation began to mix with my anger, but it was a controlled anger, precise, focused, and entirely useful. As I mapped out the countermeasures in my mind, each detail felt like placing chess pieces on a board. The dress modifications, Isadora's engineering, the hidden crystals that would refract light, the hairpin with LED lighting activated remotely, every element carefully timed for maximum visual impact. The AV system would allow me to override my mother's slideshow, replacing her humiliation narrative with real evidence. Each bank transfer, each email exchange, each phone call she believed private would be exposed at the perfect moment. I imagined the shock in my parents' eyes, the disbelief, the realization that their control was a mirage. My sister Sloane's satisfaction would collapse in real time, the same way my parents' smugness would evaporate. I paced my office, running through scenarios, anticipating missteps. What if Sloane grabbed the wrong thread? What if a camera angle failed? Each contingency was accounted for. Isadora even prepared a backup dress in case of unexpected errors, a secondary system to guarantee the transformation would occur flawlessly. I visualized Darren at the control station, finger poised over the triggers, every angle captured, audio synchronized perfectly. I pictured Jenna's timeline and documentation being ready for public display, revealing their greed and deceit without me ever lifting my voice. Veronica and Robert were briefed, prepared to stand as witnesses to my professional identity and capabilities, reinforcing that this wasn't just personal retribution, it was truth revealed. Even the potential wild cards were managed. Marcus Thorne, ever the opportunist, might attempt to leverage the chaos for financial gain, but I had anticipated his presence with security and evidence ready. Eleanor Vance, my father's former mistress and potential source of disruption, would be placed strategically to maximize the exposure of my family's past indiscretions. Each person, each variable, had a place in the plan. I was no longer just reacting. I was orchestrating a performance, an event of precision and inevitability, where every reaction, every word, every gasp would play into the narrative I controlled. The planning required patience. Hours of calls, strategy sessions, and mental visualization ensured that the unfolding would be flawless. I thought about the transformation of the dress again, each panel of satin designed to fall away in a controlled cascade, revealing the hidden crystalline layer beneath. The light from the embedded crystals would explode, literally refracting across the room in a visual spectacle. The hairpin added a subtle halo effect, enhancing the aura of the transformation. Sloane's dress, meanwhile, had been subtly sabotaged with weakened seams, ensuring that her planned triumph would instead become a public embarrassment. The narrative was clear their cruelty, their assumptions, their manipulation would be exposed, while my control, my ingenuity, and my power would be fully visible to every observer. The juxtaposition thrilled me. My family believed they were executing a masterstroke. They had rehearsed, they had calculated, they had counted on my reaction. But in reality, I had already rehearsed more, calculated more, and anticipated every variable they could throw at me. They had given me everything I needed to turn the situation to my advantage. Their hubris became my ammunition. Every insult, every laugh, every moment of anticipation they had plotted would now serve as the setup for the revelation of their own deception and greed. I also considered the personal dimension, the emotional stakes. Ethan, my fiance, would be a participant by presence, a witness to the truth, someone who had always seen the real me despite the shadows and masks. I had to manage his awareness, prepare him for the revelation in a way that wouldn't jeopardize our bond, but would ensure his support. His presence would anchor me, remind me of the personal stakes beyond professional triumph or public spectacle. This wasn't merely a display of power, it was a reclamation of autonomy, identity, and agency. By the afternoon, the team was assembled, each member in place with their instructions, contingency plans, and tools. Isadora's atelier had become a command center, silk and satin, interlaced with engineering and strategy. Darren was setting up the AV system, testing angles and lighting, confirming that every panel, every hidden crystal, every reflective surface would behave as intended. Jenna had laid out her evidence meticulously, cross-referencing each transaction, each email, each suspicious interaction. Veronica and Robert reviewed protocols for witness credibility and public statements, ensuring their roles were both subtle and authoritative. Every element, from aesthetic to legal, from technical to dramatic, was meticulously aligned. The process was immersive. Each conversation, each adjustment, each test felt like preparing for a performance that could not fail. I moved among the team with a calm authority, checking details, confirming alignment, running mental simulations. Every challenge was anticipated, every risk was mitigated. The thrill of control, of turning fear and humiliation into a calculated public revelation, gave me a sense of power I had never experienced before. This was the moment where their assumptions about me would be shattered. This was where the invisible empire I had built in silence would manifest in the most personal and public way possible. As the day drew to a close, I stood in my office, reviewing each component in my mind: the dress, the lighting, the AV triggers, the timing, the witness placement, the legal evidence, the financial documentation, the strategic positioning of potential disruptors. Every detail had been considered, rehearsed, and tested. The family who thought they could orchestrate my downfall had unwittingly provided me with all the information and opportunity needed to assert my power and reveal their true nature. It was a performance of precision, elegance, and inevitability. And through it all, I felt calm, determined, and in control. The fear and anger I had experienced the night before had crystallized into strategy and preparation. I knew my family's weaknesses intimately, their assumptions and habits, their overconfidence and blind spots, and I knew my own strengths, my patience, my intelligence, my capacity to anticipate, adapt, and execute. The narrative had shifted. I was no longer the potential victim. I was the orchestrator, the protagonist, the one in command. Every decision, every call, every preparation reinforced that reality. The dress would not fall apart to humiliate me. It would transform to reveal my power. The AV system would not broadcast my shame. It would expose the truth of my family's greed and deceit. The financial evidence would not simply intimidate, it would confirm their culpability and my foresight. The audience would witness not my humiliation, but the unraveling of a carefully constructed facade. And the emergence of the woman they had underestimated for far too long. Every detail, every moment, every participant was a piece of the puzzle, carefully aligned for the moment of revelation. As I finally leaned back, hands resting lightly on the edge of my desk, I allowed myself a brief smile. The plan was in motion, the team prepared, and the stage set. What my family thought would break me would instead showcase every aspect of my strength, resourcefulness, and ingenuity. They had underestimated me, and in doing so, they had sealed their own undoing. And me, I would step into the spotlight fully prepared, fully confident, and fully in control. The countdown had begun, and every second brought me closer to the moment when the thread they pulled would unravel their entire world. The day Isadora worked her magic on my dress, her atelier felt more like a war room than a boutique. Silk and satin hung from racks, threads pinned with precision, and sketches littered every surface. She moved around the gown like a general surveying a battlefield, explaining each modification as she went. The outer layer, the one meant to be tugged apart, was now engineered to release in a controlled spiral. Each panel would float gracefully away, catching light, creating the illusion of magic rather than chaos. Beneath it, the underdress glimmered with thousands of microcrystals sewn in constellation patterns. Liquid starlight, she called it. It would reflect every beam of light, creating a dazzling display that would leave the ballroom in awe. We rehearsed the mechanics repeatedly. Isadora demonstrated how a single pull would activate the hidden panels, timing them to catch the spotlight perfectly. The hairpin, a seemingly delicate accessory, contained tiny LED lights designed to create a subtle halo around my head. 4 hours of battery life, and Darren could trigger it remotely, ensuring the lighting effect would synchronize perfectly with the dress's transformation. I ran my fingers over the smooth fabric, imagining Sloane's smug grin at what she thought was going to be my humiliation. And I couldn't help but smile. Not anymore. I thought, not today. Meanwhile, Sloane's dress received a very different kind of attention. She had chosen a deep burgundy gown, elegant, designed to stand out among the bridesmaids. But Isadora, ever meticulous, had subtly weakened key seams, particularly at stress points, ensuring that any sudden tug or abrupt movement, like the one she planned to use against me, would backfire spectacularly. The seam would split dramatically, leaving her scrambling and exposed, all while preserving the overall integrity of her dress until the moment of truth. The irony wasn't lost on me. What was meant to be my public disgrace would become her downfall. Lighting was orchestrated with military precision. Darren mapped every spotlight in the ballroom, accounting for every angle where the dress could reflect or refract light. Pin spots would illuminate the crystalline underdress from 3 directions, creating a radiance that seemed almost otherworldly. Each crystal had been selected to fragment light, amplifying the effect and creating an ethereal aura around me. As I stood there, watching the setup, I could already envision the gasp of the crowd, the flash of cameras capturing the moment, and the complete reversal of expectation. The choreography of the transformation was just as precise. Timing would be everything. Sloane's pull had to coincide with my father's toast, her attempt to humiliate me at the pinnacle of attention. But with the AV system under Darren's control, we had a backup plan ready. The moment she moved the thread, the lighting would hit, the outer panels would release, and my underdress would shimmer brilliantly, leaving the audience stunned rather than amused. Every misstep on Sloane's part, every miscalculated tug, would play into the narrative I had designed. I rehearsed the mental sequence again and again. First, the pull, then the panels gracefully floating away, then the crystals igniting under the spotlight. Finally, the hairpin activated to add the halo effect. 12 seconds from the first tug to the final reveal. Isadora had timed it perfectly. It would be a crescendo, a moment of transformation that no one could have anticipated. I felt a thrill as I imagined the astonishment, the awe, and the sheer disbelief. The humiliation they had plotted was mine to control, to turn into a spectacle of empowerment and revelation. My anticipation grew as we tested the lighting, adjusting angles and intensity to maximize the brilliance of the crystals. Each test brought a slight shimmer, a flicker, a glimpse of the magic that would soon unfold. I couldn't help but laugh softly at the thought of Sloane, poised to destroy me, and instead being outshone, quite literally, by the dress she intended to sabotage. The reversal was poetic, satisfying in ways that words could hardly capture. Isadora guided me through the final adjustments, ensuring the dress would move as fluidly as intended. The outer layers were weighted just so, tiny glass beads at the hems to ensure a graceful descent, each panel spinning like butterfly wings as they detached. The underdress, luminous and structured, caught every beam of light, amplifying the spectacle. The attention to detail was staggering, and I felt a rush of pride and confidence, not just in the dress, but in the entire plan. Every element we had constructed was a reflection of control, strategy, and elegance. Then came the hairpin. I held it delicately, pressing the central stone as instructed. A soft glow emerged, a subtle yet captivating halo effect. Isadora explained that Darren could trigger it remotely, ensuring perfect timing with the dress's transformation. The effect would be ethereal, ascending above the petty cruelty of the room, highlighting not vulnerability, but power, light, and grace. I practiced moving it through the mirror, seeing myself as I would appear, radiant, in control, untouchable in a way that my family could not imagine. I considered Sloane's perspective, imagining her hand finding the thread, the tension in the seam she had expected to control, and the catastrophic reveal that would instead fall on her. Her carefully calculated moment of triumph would become her undoing. Each step she took would serve as a catalyst for the spectacle we had orchestrated. I could already see the split seam, the flailing attempts to correct it, the gasp from onlookers, the precision, the irony, the satisfaction. It was deliciously perfect. The day passed in a blur of testing, adjusting, and rehearsing. We simulated the pull, timed the light sequences, synchronized the hairpin activation, and checked every angle for the best photographic capture. Darren and I walked through each scenario, counting seconds, noting reactions, refining details. The precision was thrilling, the stakes exhilarating. Every movement, every decision had been accounted for, every contingency planned. I felt calm, centered, confident. This wasn't just about a dress or a wedding. It was about taking control, about rewriting the narrative, about turning a carefully plotted humiliation into an unforgettable triumph. Even the smallest details mattered. The reflections off the crystal underdress, the positioning of the guests, the timing of the father-daughter dance, the angles of the chandeliers, all were accounted for. Isadora's genius had transformed silk and satin into a mechanism of revelation, a tool that would amplify the drama of the moment while keeping me at the center. Luminous, commanding attention. Sloane's sabotage, by contrast, had become an integral part of the spectacle, an unwitting accomplice in her own public undoing. I stood in front of the mirror, taking in the complete effect. The dress was stunning, the light magical, the halo perfect. My confidence swelled, not out of arrogance, but from a quiet satisfaction. The transformation was literal and symbolic, a visual metaphor for reclaiming power, for stepping out from the shadows of my family's cruelty, for asserting identity and control. Every piece of silk, every crystal, every carefully placed LED light was a part of a narrative I controlled entirely. The dress had become armor, a statement, a story told in motion and light. I allowed myself to imagine the reactions, not just the gasp of surprise, but the sudden awareness among the guests of the truth about my family's intentions. The AV system would override the slideshow, presenting evidence of deceit and financial manipulation. My parents would watch as the spectacle they had plotted to humiliate me instead highlighted their hubris, their greed, and their lack of awareness. Sloane, meanwhile, would become part of the narrative, her own dress betraying her ambitions and intentions, turning her calculated move into a moment of public embarrassment. The symmetry, the poetic justice, was exquisite. As I rehearsed my own movements, imagining the first tug, the panels spiraling away, the crystals catching every light, and the hairpin illuminating my presence, I felt a surge of exhilaration. This was control, clarity, precision. Every detail we had constructed was working in tandem, a choreography of light, fabric, and human reaction. The anticipation was almost tangible, a vibration in my chest that pulsed with the certainty that this plan would unfold exactly as intended, not out of luck, but out of meticulous design and execution. Isadora's finishing touches, the final adjustments to the dress, the precise placement of the crystals, the weight of each panel, made the entire creation feel alive. I ran my hands over the fabric, visualizing the ballroom, the guests, the pull, the transformation. The effect would be breathtaking, impossible to ignore, impossible to misconstrue. Sloane's sabotage had become an elegant plot twist, a dramatic pivot that would highlight my ingenuity rather than diminish me. The spectacle would be theirs to witness, my power to command, my narrative to control. We ran through the sequence one final time. Each second was accounted for, each motion synchronized. The outer layer released in a controlled spiral, the crystals refracted light in multiple directions. The hairpin activated to create a halo effect, and the AV system replaced the intended humiliation with evidence of deception. Every participant in the plan understood their role, every variable accounted for, and I stood at the center, calm, confident, and ready. The fear and tension of the previous nights had transformed into a controlled thrill, a satisfaction that came from knowing that every move, every misstep on my family's part would contribute to the ultimate reversal. As I left Isadora's atelier that evening, the dress carefully transported and hidden until the wedding day, I felt a quiet exhilaration. The transformation had been planned, rehearsed, and perfected. Sloane's sabotage would unfold precisely as predicted. The AV system would highlight the truth. The lighting would enhance every moment, and the hairpin would crown the entire spectacle. What they intended as my humiliation had become a dazzling display of my ingenuity, my control, and my triumph. And all I had to do was wait. After setting the plans for the dress and the AV system in motion, my focus shifted to something even more concrete: numbers, transactions, evidence. I couldn't shake the thought that while my family had been obsessively planning my humiliation, they'd left a trail of greed, fraud, and misdirection, hidden in plain sight. I opened the first set of bank statements Jenna had sent over, and my stomach sank slightly at the clarity of it all. Every withdrawal, every transfer, meticulously cataloged. They'd thought no one would notice, no one would question where the money went. But I had Jenna, the forensic accountant who could dissect everything and expose it with surgical precision. She laid it all out for me in the conference room of her law firm, papers spread across the table like evidence in a criminal investigation. I traced the first transaction, $10,000 withdrawn by my mother from their joint account on January 15th, the same day. Sloane had deposited $9,500 into her account, leaving a missing $500 in untraceable cash. Little things like that, the tiny discrepancies, the timing, the overlapping transactions spoke volumes. They were careless, arrogant, confident that no one would look closely. I could almost hear their laughter over the phone, confident in their plan to embarrass me. Jenna highlighted the emails between my father and Marcus Thorne. My pulse quickened. Thorne, the man who had tried to ruin my company, was now being looped into their schemes. He had no idea, of course, that the company he thought he could manipulate was mine. My father, in his arrogance, was feeding him insider information through coded emails, contracts, stock options, and financial instruments that could net millions, all coordinated without the slightest concern for legality. My parents had laid themselves bare in their own hubris. Ugh, I had to suppress a thrill of satisfaction. That irony was exquisite. They had been plotting my public humiliation while simultaneously constructing a web of fraud that could ruin themselves. I took a deep breath, focusing. The stakes were immense, but I wasn't panicking. Panic wouldn't help. Clarity would. I needed to coordinate, to document, to ensure that when the time came, the exposure would be airtight. Jenna explained the details of the Everlasting Memories LLC shell company, registered to a P.O. box, a website as flimsy as paper. The payments for the wedding, inflated by 30%, were flowing through Sloane's account. Luxury items, deposits on property, expensive designer clothes, all funded by what should have been our wedding expenses. They had disguised it as legitimate business expenses through my father's consulting firm. Tax fraud, technically. The audacity was almost poetic. Darren chimed in through video call, already monitoring communications and keeping track of any digital trails. He had eyes and ears on everything, and his calm, methodical approach complemented Jenna's meticulous accounting. They were the perfect team. I was the coordinator, the strategist, the one orchestrating the broader picture. Every piece of evidence, every detail, every timestamp was cross-referenced and backed up. We weren't just exposing a theft, we were constructing an indisputable narrative, legally defensible, visually demonstrable, and undeniable to anyone who would see it. We worked late into the night. The documents were staggering in volume emails, bank statements, transaction histories, screenshots of social media posts, images of receipts. Every detail corroborated the others. We had full documentation that would withstand scrutiny in any court or public forum. Jenna even created a chronological timeline, marking withdrawals, transfers, suspicious meetings, and communications with Thorne. We could show, without question, a deliberate pattern of misappropriation and fraud. Each step increased my confidence, my calm, my sense of purpose. I had the evidence, I had the team, and I had the timing. Darren set up a monitoring system to track real-time communications on the wedding day. If my parents attempted to coordinate, to adjust, to interfere, we'd know immediately. Every phone call, every message, every email would be observed. This wasn't just about observation, it was about preparation. If they thought they could improvise their way out, I had contingencies. If they thought they could spin narratives to the guests or press, I had documentation ready to counteract any misrepresentation. Our coverage would be total, precise, and undeniable. The level of control I had over the unfolding scenario was intoxicating. I reviewed the shell companies, the fake vendors, the inflated invoices, and the kickbacks to Sloane. Every document was cross-checked, verified, and prepared for presentation. I could see how the public would react, how investors, journalists, and even our family friends would respond. The narrative was clear: my family had built a house of cards in their arrogance, and all of it was visible, exposed by their own actions. I imagined their faces as the documents went public, the slow realization dawning that the very people they sought to humiliate had the upper hand. That alone was satisfying beyond measure. Jenna suggested packaging the financial evidence separately for public exposure after the wedding. It wasn't just about humiliation, it was about accountability. If my family tried to claim fabrication, the documents would speak for themselves. Bank records, email threads, transactions all verified, all legally obtained. Darren confirmed surveillance of every guest's house. Audio enhancements, capturing discussions in real time. We would have witnesses. We would have proof. The power balance had shifted entirely in our favor, and the knowledge brought a sense of calm satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. We considered every scenario. What if my parents tried to intervene? What if Sloane attempted to sabotage the evidence before it went public? Every possibility was planned for. Darren's AV control allowed instant override of any content my mother attempted to display. Isadora's dress modifications ensured that any physical attempt at humiliation would backfire visually. Every detail of the spectacle was synchronized with the presentation of evidence, turning a potential disaster into a carefully orchestrated revelation. The theater of it all thrilled me. My family had unknowingly set the stage for their own exposure. We also had to consider Marcus Thorne. The man was unpredictable, motivated by greed and revenge. Darren's surveillance and audio equipment would capture any attempt he made to intervene. Any interaction with my father or other family members would be logged, recorded, and preserved. The possibility of external complications didn't unsettle me. It merely reinforced the need for meticulous planning. Each variable was accounted for, each risk mitigated. I felt entirely in control, poised, and ready to execute the plan. The collaboration with Jenna and Darren deepened as we worked through the evidence. She walked me through each financial anomaly, explaining how the transfers were disguised, how the timing of withdrawals coincided with key wedding events, how the coordination between accounts suggested collusion. Darren mapped out the audiovisual coverage, noting where cameras would capture every movement, every expression, every reaction. We rehearsed scenarios where the evidence would be revealed, discussing timing, audience reactions, and contingency plans. The integration of financial intelligence and real-time surveillance felt almost like conducting an orchestra. Each element had a role, and I was the conductor, guiding the performance to perfection. I considered the emotional component as well. The guests would witness the dress transformation, the AV reveal, and the documentation of financial malfeasance simultaneously. The juxtaposition would highlight not just my ingenuity, but the full extent of their deception. The spectacle would be undeniable. Undeniable to family, friends, and the press. The elegance of turning their cruelty into revelation was intoxicating. My confidence grew with each rehearsal, each review, each confirmation of accuracy. I was ready. We were ready. The evidence itself was staggering. Bank statements, shell company records, email exchanges with Thorne, even contracts that appeared legitimate but concealed kickbacks and embezzlement. Every document told a story, and together, they painted a complete picture of intentional deception and fraud. My family's arrogance had led them to believe that these actions would go unnoticed, that their careful planning of my humiliation would remain unchallenged. They had underestimated me, my allies, and the meticulous nature of our preparation. Their house of cards was now perfectly documented, and I was holding the blueprint. The legal implications were clear. Tax fraud, misappropriation of funds, and insider trading were all present, and the evidence was undeniable. Jenna's analysis was precise, thorough, and designed to withstand scrutiny. I reviewed her reports, making sure that every fact was accurate, every connection traceable. There would be no loopholes, no wiggle room, no ambiguity. The public exposure, timed perfectly with the wedding, would reveal the truth in a way that was both irrefutable and dramatically satisfying. The anticipation of that moment filled me with a quiet thrill, a controlled excitement that reminded me of the stakes in my readiness. Throughout the process, I maintained calm control. There was no rush, no panic, no overreaction. The planning was methodical, deliberate, and precise. Each call with Jenna and Darren, each review of the evidence, each discussion of AV placement, lighting, and timing reinforced my sense of command. I felt as if I were watching the pieces fall into place from a position of complete authority. The tension and suspense weren't fear, they were focus, a heightened awareness of the stakes and the perfection of our preparation. By the time we concluded our review sessions, I felt a deep satisfaction. The financial evidence was complete, the AV system prepared, the choreography of dress transformation rehearsed and perfected. Sloan and my parents had thought they were plotting my downfall, but in reality, they had handed me everything I needed to expose them with precision, clarity, and undeniable impact. Their hubris, greed, and overconfidence had become the very tools I would use to reveal the truth. I sat back, hands on the table, looking at the array of evidence. Each document, each record, each recorded conversation was a testament to the meticulous nature of my preparation and the depth of their own blind spots. The anticipation of the reveal was almost electric. I imagined the moment the guests would realize the truth. The faces of my parents as they saw their misdeeds exposed, and the subtle horror in Sloane's expression as her attempted triumph collapsed. The sense of control, the strategic orchestration, and the inevitability of the exposure gave me a sense of satisfaction that was hard to describe. Throughout the process, I kept my mind clear, focused on the sequence, the timing, and the presentation. Each element had a purpose, each action a consequence. The transformation of the dress, the activation of the lighting and hairpin, the AV system overriding the planned slideshow, and the presentation of financial and legal evidence all aligned into a single, cohesive moment of revelation. The plan was flawless, and the anticipation of executing it was both thrilling and deeply satisfying. I felt a sense of calm authority, the kind that comes from knowing you have prepared for every variable, every potential complication, and every reaction. As night fell, I finally leaned back in my chair, allowing myself a brief moment of reflection. The strategy was complete, the evidence prepared, the choreography rehearsed. I had transformed fear and anger into precision and control, turning their cruel intentions into a platform for revelation and justice. I felt a quiet thrill, knowing that every move they had made to humiliate me would be turned against them with elegance, precision, and undeniable impact. The stage was set, the moment approaching, and I was ready to execute it flawlessly. The wedding day began with a quiet, almost surreal tension. I woke before dawn, the anticipation buzzing in my chest like electricity. The day I had been planning for weeks, months even, had finally arrived. The dress hung nearby, its layers carefully protected, each fold a promise of the transformation to come. I ran my hands over the fabric, feeling the smooth satin, the hidden crystals, the weight of the panels designed to fall away in a choreographed cascade. Every detail had been considered, every contingency planned. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, knowing that the night ahead would be equal parts theater, justice, and revelation. Isadora was the first to arrive at the bridal suite. She moved with a controlled, graceful urgency, adjusting the outer layers, checking seams, and verifying the positioning of every crystal. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she muttered about micromagnets, dissolvable thread, and the physics of fabric release. I could barely suppress a grin. Sloane had no idea the thread she intended to tug was connected to anything but my humiliation. She didn't know that with a single pull, the narrative would flip entirely. The dress wasn't just clothing anymore. It was a stage, a weapon, and a shield, all in one. Darren checked the AV systems while Isadora finalized the dress. Hidden cameras were in the ice sculptures, chandeliers, and centerpieces, each capturing every angle of the ballroom. Audio devices picked up whispered conversations, attempted sabotage, and any interference from my family. The system had been rehearsed dozens of times, and Darren was calm, methodical, a master orchestrating an invisible symphony. Every spot, every microphone, every lens was prepared to capture the exact moment the tables turned. I could feel the thrill building. The same electric tension I'd felt in boardrooms when sealing multi-million-dollar deals. Only this time, the stakes were personal. Jenna arrived next, tablet in hand, carrying folders filled with financial evidence and legal documentation. She spread everything out on the small table in the suite bank statements, email printouts, transaction histories, and annotated records of shell companies and inflated invoices. Each document had been verified, every connection traced, every anomaly cross-referenced. Her calm confidence reinforced mine. We weren't improvising. We were revealing a pattern of fraud, greed, and deceit that my parents and sister had assumed no one would notice. Their arrogance had given us everything we needed. I slipped into the underdress, the crystalline layers catching the early morning light streaming through the window. The soft glow of the embedded microcrystals reflected across the walls, already hinting at the spectacle to come. I attached the hairpin, pressing the central stone and watching the subtle halo effect illuminate around my face. 4 hours of battery, remotely triggered by Darren. Perfect timing, perfect effect. Sloane's dress sat nearby, an elegant burgundy gown. It seems subtly weakened at critical stress points. She would be the unintended star of her own public undoing. Her sabotage transformed into a spectacle of poetic justice. The bridal suite was a hive of controlled chaos. Isadora adjusted layers and seams. Darren ran through AV sequences and tested lighting angles. Jenna reviewed documents and evidence, and I moved through it all, ensuring every detail was perfect. Each person knew their role, understood the choreography, and contributed to the symphony we were about to perform. This was precision, execution, and artistry all rolled into one. My heart beat steadily, but the thrill of impending triumph sent a subtle shiver down my spine. The arrival of the guests added to the tension. I watched through the leaded glass windows as well-dressed attendees entered the ballroom, unaware of the drama waiting to unfold. Phones were out, cameras poised, and the energy in the room was palpable, somewhere in the crowd. My parents moved confidently, convinced they were in control. Sloane lingered in the bridesmaid suite, camera ready, eyes bright with anticipation. Marcus Thorne, unpredictable and opportunistic, had been spotted at his table, probably hoping to capitalize on the chaos. And Eleanor Vance, a ghost from my father's past, was requested to be at table 12. Her presence a wild card in the unfolding story. Each variable meticulously accounted for. Charlotte Reeves, the Washington Post reporter, arrived discreetly, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She complimented the dress, circling me like an art critic examining a masterpiece. I smiled, careful, letting her catalog every detail without revealing the secret behind the transformation. The stage was set. She would witness the transformation, the revelation, and the collapse of a facade she had never suspected. Darren confirmed the lighting setup over my earpiece, 10,000 lumens from 3 angles. Crystals refracting light like a diamond disco ball. Subtle, not a chance. Perfect. The minutes ticked by. Sloane and the other bridesmaids began their final preparations, oblivious to the true nature of the sabotage embedded in her gown. My parents practiced their smiles, their rehearsed demeanor, completely unaware of the countermeasures in place. The tension was a living thing, coiling around me, thrilling in its intensity. I ran through the sequence one last time in my mind, the pull, the panels releasing, the crystals catching light, the hairpin halo, the AV system overriding the slideshow, and the display of financial and legal evidence. 12 seconds from the first tug to the final reveal, and the spectacle would be complete. The wedding coordinator announced 5 minutes to processional. The orchestral notes began to swell, and I felt a calm focus settle over me. Ethan stood beside me, charcoal tuxedo impeccable, his hand warm over mine. He didn't know every detail of the plan, but he trusted me, and that trust anchored me. I could feel the tension of 200 eyes in the ballroom, every guest anticipating a moment they didn't yet understand. My father waited at the end of the aisle, ready to give me away, the perfect pivot point for the spectacle that would soon unfold. The orchestra played the processional march. I lifted my chin, squared my shoulders, and glided toward the door. The ballroom fell silent. Guests rose, anticipation hanging in the air. Phones poised, cameras ready. The moment of confrontation, transformation, and revelation was imminent. I took one last deep breath, feeling the weight of preparation, the meticulous planning, and the knowledge that this night would redefine everything. I was no longer just Riley Hart, the daughter they assumed powerless. I was the orchestrator, the strategist, the protagonist in a story they had no control over. The ceremony proceeded smoothly, the initial toasts and formalities setting the stage. My father rose, champagne flute catching the light, his voice carrying across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "my privilege to share a few words about my daughter, Riley." I felt Sloane shift in her seat, angling for the perfect approach, her anticipation palpable. My mother dabbed at her eyes, rehearsing her performance of concern and emotional vulnerability. Every movement, every glance, perfectly timed according to their plan. But their narrative was about to be rewritten. Riley has always been unique. My father continued, grand ambitions beyond her years, dreams perhaps too big. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd, those familiar with our family dynamic exchanging uneasy glances. I pressed my fingernails into my palm beneath the table, Ethan's hand tightening over mine. "Pride goes before a fall," he said theatrically. And at that exact moment, Sloane struck. Her hand found the thread she had been rehearsing. The pull was precise, vicious, intended to humiliate me in front of 200 witnesses. But here's the twist: the dress responded exactly as designed. The outer panels of satin began to release in a controlled cascade, floating like snow in a globe. But instead of revealing underwear and humiliation, the hidden crystalline layers beneath erupted into brilliance. 10,000 lumens from 3 angles caught the microcrystals perfectly, throwing rainbows across the stunned faces of the guests. The hairpin activated simultaneously, a subtle halo effect illuminating me from within. Gasps echoed, phones swung toward me, capturing transformation, not disgrace. I rose from my chair as the full effect completed. I wasn't falling, I was ascending, glowing with confidence and control. Magic, engineered to perfection. Behind me, Sloane's movement triggered the weakened seams of her burgundy dress. The fabric split dramatically along one side, exposing industrial strength shapewear she had sworn never existed. Her shriek, perfectly captured by camera 13, was a mix of horror and disbelief. The timing, the irony, the poetic reversal, it was flawless. The room's energy shifted instantly from anticipation of embarrassment to awe, amazement, and shock. The narrative had flipped completely. Darren's voice came over my earpiece, technical difficulties with the slideshow, activating backup content in 3, 2, 1. The screens around the ballroom flickered. Instead of images of awkward teenage moments, the slides now displayed financial documents and recordings of my parents' own words. "She needs to learn her place," my mother had said. Every guest could see it: bank statements, transfer records, invoices from the fake vendor, all displayed with clinical precision. My father's smug expression drained to ash gray. The champagne flute slipped, shattering on the floor. My mother's practiced tears turned to real ones, the narrative of cruelty collapsing before their eyes. Sloane gasped, scrambling to fix her dress, her attempts futile. The slideshow continued, audio synchronized perfectly with the visuals. My family's own voices narrated their greed and manipulations, juxtaposed against the dazzling, confident, luminous display of my transformation. The guests were riveted, phones clicked, cameras flashed, and the chaos unfolded with surgical precision. The spectacle was not just entertainment, it was revelation, justice, and art. As the AV system showcased the evidence, the final slide appeared: High-End Strategy Group Leadership Chart, my name at the top as CEO and founder. The ballroom erupted in applause and astonishment. Veronica Hale rose, slow clapping, Acknowledging the strategic brilliance, Robert Chase joined, nodding in agreement. The message was unmistakable. The woman they attempted to humiliate had built a billion-dollar company while they plotted against her. Ethan stood beside me, momentarily forgetting his own prepared speech, improvising support. My victory was complete, public, and undeniable. Marcus Thorne attempted to intervene, but his efforts were blocked by security. Eleanor Vance, placed strategically at table 12, added drama to the unfolding scene. Every element, every player, every moment had contributed to the flawless execution of the plan. The timing, the choreography, the integration of financial and visual evidence, and the dress transformation had coalesced into a single, coherent spectacle that no one could have anticipated. The tables had turned spectacularly. With my family caught entirely off guard, the orchestral waltz began, and Ethan offered his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Soon-to-be Walker Always?" I said, letting him lead me onto the floor. As we spun past the head table, I caught sight of my family, my parents frozen, society crumbling around them, Sloane fleeing, her plans unraveling. Grandma Rose, seated at table 3, raised her champagne glass, pride shining on her face. The thread had been pulled exactly as intended, but it was their world unraveling, not mine. The screens continued to display evidence, showing bank withdrawals, luxury purchases, and email correspondence exposing embezzlement and insider trading, audio layered perfectly, their voices narrating their own crimes. The juxtaposition was devastating while they plotted my humility. The evidence showcased their greed and hubris. 200 guests bore witness to the full scope of the deception. Social media lit up instantly, phones capturing every gasp, every expression of shock and awe. The narrative they had intended to control was now entirely mine. The payoff was complete, thrilling, and deeply satisfying. I danced with Ethan, moving through the ballroom, each step a statement of triumph. Darren managed the AV feeds, switching between financial documentation and live reactions. Every detail had been executed with precision. The evidence, the transformation, the exposure of fraud and manipulation, it was flawless. My family had underestimated me at every turn, and the results were spectacular. Their plan, carefully rehearsed and executed to humiliate me, had become the stage for my revelation and empowerment. The audience had been captivated, astonished, and enlightened, witnessing not my humiliation, but my ascendancy. And even after the initial shock, the guests remained engaged. Conversations resumed, but now focused on the spectacle, the ingenuity, and the elegance of the execution. The reception had transformed from a celebration of marriage into a celebration of truth, justice, and personal triumph. My family sat isolated, their carefully constructed social image collapsing, the empty spaces around their table growing as former allies distanced themselves. The realization was complete. They had destroyed themselves, not me. I had merely ensured that everyone could see it. The immediate aftermath of the wedding revelation was chaos, but it wasn't the kind of chaos anyone had anticipated. My family sat frozen at their table, shock etched into every line of their faces. My father's polished veneer had cracked, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish, utterly speechless. My mother's rehearsed tears were replaced by real ones, streaming freely as she grasped the gravity of what had just unfolded. Sloane's smug expression had completely vanished. She fumbled, her carefully constructed poise collapsing under the weight of her own sabotage backfiring. The room buzzed with murmurs, whispers spreading like wildfire as every guest processed the spectacle they had just witnessed. Grandma Rose stood from her seat, sharp and commanding despite her 85 years. Her eyes, still keen and bright, swept across the room, settling on my parents with an intensity that made even the boldest society matrons shrink back. Speaking in a voice that carried without raising it, she reminded my father exactly whose home he had mortgaged, whose legacy had been risked, and the years of trust and love that had been jeopardized. It wasn't an angry scolding, it was precision, authority, and undeniable truth. The weight of her words landed harder than any rebuke they had ever received. The crowd went quiet, absorbing the gravity of the situation. My grandmother's presence was a shield, a voice of reason, and a moral compass, all at once. As the financial and legal evidence flashed on the screens around the ballroom, the consequences of my family's actions became impossible to ignore. Bank withdrawals, inflated invoices, shell company transfers, and email correspondence with Marcus Thorne all displayed clearly for the attendees to see. The audio of my parents and sister plotting in their study narrated their own crimes, greed, malice, and deceit, now recorded and undeniable. The juxtaposition was visceral. 200 witnesses absorbed the visual proof of everything they had attempted to conceal. Shock, embarrassment, and disbelief radiated from their faces in waves. And I couldn't help but notice the subtle tremor in my father's hands as he realized the full extent of the exposure. His empire of control had crumbled in real time, and there was no recovery. Sloane tried to speak, to argue, to reclaim some dignity. But the split seam of her dress and the cameras capturing every movement left her floundering. Every motion she made reinforced the contrast between what they intended and what actually happened. Her attempts to manipulate or salvage the moment only amplified the dramatic irony. She was left with no words, no plausible defense, and no way to mitigate the public humiliation she had orchestrated. It was poetic, satisfying, and the audience couldn't look away. This was justice delivered not by shouting or confrontation, but by the elegance of exposure, precision, and timing. Meanwhile, I remained at the center, glowing in the transformed crystalline dress, the hairpin halo accentuating my presence. I felt the calm satisfaction of control. The power of knowing that every element, from the fabric to the lighting, from the AV system to the legal evidence, had been orchestrated flawlessly. The audience saw not only my triumph, but also the culmination of strategy, foresight, and preparation. They witnessed a reversal so complete it was almost cinematic. What had been intended as my humiliation became a revelation of truth and accountability. I had reclaimed my narrative, my authority, and my dignity in a single, breathtaking sequence. Ethan stood beside me, quietly supportive, his presence grounding me amidst the storm of reactions. He took my hand as we moved across the ballroom, the waltz continuing around us while the screens narrated the story my family never intended to tell. His eyes were wide, a mixture of awe and pride. I could see the unspoken understanding between us. He recognized the power, the intelligence, and the careful orchestration behind every second of what had just transpired. This wasn't just a victory for me, it was a shared triumph, a moment of connection that transcended the spectacle. Our bond was reinforced not by the ease of the evening, but by the clarity of truth and mutual respect. Grandma Rose's intervention didn't stop with words. She moved to assert legal authority, producing disinheritance papers for my parents. Her voice, steady and clear, outlined the consequences: the house, the investments, and all assets would be transferred to me unless they publicly acknowledged their wrongdoing. There was no room for negotiation, no ambiguity. My parents signed in stunned compliance, their expressions a mix of disbelief, fear, and resignation. My mother's tears continued, now mingled with regret, as she realized the magnitude of the repercussions. Sloane, still reeling from the spectacle, finally lowered her phone, her carefully curated social media image undone in real time. It was complete. The control they had assumed was theirs had shifted irreversibly. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, not triumph in a gloating sense, but the clarity and empowerment of reclaiming what had been almost stolen. The house was secure, the assets under my management, and the financial chaos orchestrated by my family, now documented and accounted for. The public exposure ensured accountability, but it also freed me from the shadow of their greed and malice. The weight of expectation, obligation, and betrayal lifted, replaced by a calm, confident sense of autonomy. I was in control of my life, my future, and the narrative that had once been manipulated by others. Amidst the chaos, I found quiet moments with Ethan. He leaned in, voice soft, murmuring words of support, pride, and love. The complexity of the night, the tension, and the public spectacle faded in those moments, replaced by intimacy and shared understanding. We talked quietly, briefly escaping the whirlwind of 200 eyes and countless judgments. The thrill of the exposure and the satisfaction of justice became shared experience, a bond strengthened by the clarity of truth. His hand in mine, his calm confidence, mirrored the control I felt over the situation. We laughed softly, the tension breaking just enough to remind us that beyond strategy and spectacle, we were connected by something deeper, authentic, and enduring. As the guests gradually processed the revelation, whispers turned to discussions. Shock gave way to admiration and incredulity. The story of the wedding spread across the room, amplified by cameras, phones, and social media. Everyone bore witness to not just the spectacle, but the narrative of cunning, foresight, and intelligence that had enabled me to orchestrate the reversal. My family's credibility crumbled. The tables they had assumed would humiliate me had instead showcased their own hubris and deceit. The elegance of the execution, combined with the clarity of the evidence, made it impossible to refute or spin. The exposure was thorough, complete, and undeniable. Grandma Rose's presence was pivotal. She guided the resolution, ensuring that the legal consequences were immediate and irreversible. Her authority added weight to the proceedings, her wisdom and clarity cutting through the shock, the embarrassment, and the confusion. She ensured that the house was secure, that assets were transferred, and that my family understood the gravity of their actions. Her intervention reinforced the lesson of accountability, showing that wisdom, experience, and moral clarity could influence outcomes even amidst chaos. I watched her work with quiet admiration, feeling the layers of support, authority, and family legacy reinforcing my position. I took a few moments to absorb the scene. My family, once confident and controlling, was now isolated. Their power evaporated. Sloane's carefully rehearsed public image lay in ruins, her attempts at control backfiring spectacularly. My parents sat stunned, faces pale, grappling with the consequences of their choices. And amidst it all, I felt the satisfaction of having maintained calm, clarity, and control. The meticulous planning, the coordination with my team, the rehearsal, and the precise execution had all culminated in a flawless revelation. I had reclaimed my dignity, assets, and autonomy in a way that left no room for dispute or denial. Ethan and I found a quiet corner, hands intertwined, savoring a moment of relief and connection. We spoke in low voices, sharing reflections, acknowledging the complexity of the night, and appreciating the meticulous planning that had made it possible. There was laughter, a few soft tears, and the quiet thrill of triumph. In those moments, the tension of months, the fear, and the anticipation dissolved into a shared understanding of victory and partnership. We were a team, united not just by love, but by trust, strategy, and shared purpose. The chaos of the ballroom faded in the presence of that quiet, private connection. The public exposure of my family's crimes was comprehensive and undeniable. Financial mismanagement, embezzlement, tax fraud, and attempts at securities manipulation had all been documented, timed, and displayed with clarity. The visual and audio evidence left no room for denial. Even as the room buzzed with conversation, the weight of the truth settled in. My family's credibility was shattered, their control permanently diminished. The public spectacle had become a lesson in accountability, executed with precision, elegance, and unflinching clarity. The moment of revelation was complete, satisfying, and irrevocable. As the night progressed, the reception continued, transformed from a celebration of marriage to a celebration of truth, empowerment, and justice. Conversations turned to admiration for the planning, ingenuity, and execution of the evening. Guests were captivated not just by the spectacle of the dress transformation, but by the strategic brilliance behind the orchestration of exposure. The story spread organically, every whisper reinforcing the narrative of triumph, ingenuity, and rightful reclamation of power. The ballroom, once tense with anticipation, now buzzed with acknowledgement, astonishment, and genuine respect. In the quiet moments, Ethan and I shared glances across the room, smiles of understanding and satisfaction passing between us. The complexity of our emotions, relief, triumph, vindication, love intertwined seamlessly, the thrill of execution, the clarity of justice, and the intimacy of shared experience created a bond stronger than anything orchestrated by my family's deception. We moved through the evening with a sense of purpose and connection, aware of the layers of strategy, precision, and foresight that had culminated in this moment. Grandma Rose remained a steady anchor throughout the night. She ensured that my family understood the scope of their exposure, that assets were secured, and that legal consequences were clearly communicated. Her presence reinforced the lesson of accountability, and her support fortified my own sense of empowerment. She reminded me of the legacy of wisdom, strength, and clarity that I carried, providing perspective amidst the chaos. Her subtle guidance ensured that the night, though dramatic and intense, remained controlled, purposeful, and just. As the evening drew to a close, I reflected on the transformation, not just of the dress, or the spectacle, or the exposure of deception, but of myself. The little girl who had once worried about approval and validation had become a woman who commanded respect, authority, and power. I had orchestrated a flawless revelation, protected my assets, ensured accountability, and preserved my dignity. I had done so with calm, clarity, and precision, turning what was meant to humiliate me into a masterclass of strategy and empowerment. Ethan and I shared one final, quiet moment before leaving the ballroom, hands intertwined. We felt the weight of the night lift, replaced by relief, satisfaction, and connection. The chaos of exposure, the spectacle, the triumph, it had all come together perfectly. We walked to the waiting car, the celebration continuing behind us, the guests aware of the full scope of events. I looked back once, seeing my family huddled together, humbled, exposed, and irrevocably changed. The thread had been pulled, but it was their world that unraveled. I had emerged whole, empowered, and victorious. And in that moment, I knew that control, clarity, and strategy had never felt so exhilarating. Wow, what a ride. Right, Riley turned what was meant to humiliate her into a moment of absolute triumph, reclaiming her life, her assets, and her dignity. Justice served, empowerment achieved, and a wedding that no one will ever forget. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Riley's story. And hey, if you enjoyed this tale of clever reversals and empowerment, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this.